picture a village of 40 hearths that has stood in the same fold of land for 1,000 years. Now fill it with smoke that never entirely leaves, because every fire in every house burns on a dirt floor with no chimney, and the smoke has to find its own way out through the thatch. Add a street of churned mud that swallows shoes, a well that 40 families share with their animals, and a church tower whose single bell is the only clock anyone has ever needed. That's Codicote, Hertfordshire, in the year of grace 1315. A place owned, field and furrow, body and soul, by the great Abbey of St Albans 6 miles down the road. A place where a woman can be fined for grinding her own grain in her own house, and where the same woman can stand in a spring meadow at dawn and hear more bird song than most modern people will hear in their lives. A place where you could bury a neighbour in the morning and dance at a bride ale by evening. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists looking at castles and knights and tournaments. We're living it. One woman, through one turning of the year, everything she would have seen, smelled, heard and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about famine, bread and rain, and the correct way to keep a fire alive overnight. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not just one smell, it's layers. Wood smoke first, old and cold, from the fire banked under its clay curfew in the middle of the floor. Then damp thatch, a wet straw sweetness from the roof that hasn't been fully dry since Candlemas. Then the hens, 3 of them, roosting on the beam above the door, and everything 3 hens do in the night. Then wet wool drying near the hearth, and underneath it all the smell of bodies, of a bed shared by 3 people who last properly washed in the river when it was warm enough not to hurt, including you. Welcome to Codicote, in the county of Hertford, in the early spring of the year 1315. You're lying on a straw mattress on a frame of ropes and poles, in a cottage that measures perhaps 15 feet by 12, on the lane the village calls Hayden Way, in a village that belongs, as it has belonged for over 300 years, to the Abbot of St Albans. King Ethelred gave this village to the abbey in the year 1002. Nobody here remembers a time when the abbey did not own the ground under their feet, and nobody expects to live to see a time when it doesn't. Your name is Matilda Atterwell. Everyone calls you Mould. You're 28 years old, and since Martinmas, since the 11th of November, 4 months and a lifetime ago, you've been a widow. Hugh went in 3 days. A fever after the autumn ploughing, a heat in his chest, a rattle, and then a silence you still sometimes hear when the children are asleep. The manor took your best beast for the death duty, the Harriet, because the manor always takes the best beast, and your best beast was the cow. So now there is no cow. There is the cottage, the croft behind it, 3 acres of it, held now in your name by widow right. 1 ewe called Whitefoot running in the Lord's fold with the village flock, 3 hens, 2 children, and you. And here is the thing you wake up knowing, the thing that is waiting for you before your feet even touch the floor. Widow right is not a kindness, it's a bargain. You keep the cottage and the croft only so long as you render everything Hugh rendered. The rent at the quarter days, the boon works at haymaking and harvest, the hens at Christmas, the eggs at Easter. The moment you fail, the moment the reeve can stand up in the manor court and say the widow Atterwell cannot do her services, the holding can be taken back and granted to a man who can. Lady Day is 8 days away, Lady Day, the 25th of March, when the quarter's rent falls due. You have most of it. Most is not a word the Abbey's steward recognises. That is your morning. That is every morning. You do not get to lie in the dark and grieve. Grief is a luxury nobody at your level can afford, so you get up. The floor is beaten earth, strewn with old rushes, and it is cold in a way that goes through the soles of your feet and up into your knees, a cold that lives in the ground from October to May. You move by memory because the only light is a grey ghost of dawn around the edges of the shutter. 2 steps to the hearth. You crouch, and your knees crack, and you lift the curfew, the fire cover, a dome of clay with holes in it, couvre-feu, the thing that gives its name to the word curfew, and you look underneath. This is the first held breath of every day of your life. Under the ash, a dull red eye. The fire has lived through the night. You let the breath go. If the fire dies, you start again with flint and steel and scorched linen and cold fingers, and that can take the better part of an hour on a damp morning, an hour you do not have. Or you walk to a neighbour's house and carry embers home in a pot like a beggar, and everyone sees you do it, and everyone knows the widow Atterwell let her fire go out. In a village of 40 hearths, everything is seen, everything is discussed. The fire must not die. That is the first rule of your life, and it was the first rule of your mother's life and her mother's before her. You feed it now the way you'd feed a sick child, patiently in small bites. All dried furze first, which catches with a hiss and a smell like burnt honey. Then twigs. Then 2 split billets of the wood you and Alice hauled out of the Lord's hedges all autumn. Dead wood only, taken by hook or by crook, which is not a saying yet. It is the actual law you live under. What you can pull down with a shepherd's crook or a bill-hook you may take. What needs an axe belongs to the abbot. The flames climb. Light moves out across the floor, over the trestle table, the bench, the meal chest, the loom weights in the corner, the wicker cradle Stephen has nearly outgrown, the shapes of your sleeping children in the bed. Alice is 9, Stephen is 4. They're the whole of it now, the whole reason. You swing the iron pot onto its hook over the flames, 3-legged, fire-blackened, your mother's pot before it was yours, and the heaviest thing you own besides the meal chest. Into it goes water from the covered pail, a double handful of oatmeal, a smaller handful of dried peas from the sack that is emptying faster than it should. That's breakfast, dinner, and half of supper. Pottage. Pottage yesterday. Pottage today. Pottage until the day you die, and you will count yourself blessed if there is always pottage. While it heats, you dress in the dark. A linen smock you slept in. Over it, a kirtle of coarse wool the colour of oatmeal, because dye costs money. Hose gartered at the knee, patched at both heels, shoes of stiff leather, mended, remended, and then the wimple, the linen cloth that goes over your head and around your throat, because you are a married woman, a widow now, but the rule holds. And a grown woman's hair is not for the street. Girls go bareheaded. Wives are covered. Everyone who passes you on the lane today will read your whole station in Life from Cloth. Covered head, no cloak clasp, patched hose, widow. Appearances matter in this village. They matter more than almost anything, because they are the only thing everybody can read. Your one small vanity hangs at your belt. Hugh's knife, in its sheath, with a handle of ash he carved himself the winter Alice was born. A knife is not decoration. You will use it today 12 times, on bread, on rope, on a hen if a hen needs killing. But it's his, and it's good, and it hangs at your waist where his hand used to be, and that is a thing you do not say out loud to anyone. And under your feet, beneath the third floorboard of the little raised sleeping platform, the only sawn boards in the house, there is the other thing you do not say out loud. A quern, a hand mill. 2 circles of grey millstone grit, each about as wide as a cooking pot, the top stone pierced with a hole for the grain and a socket for a wooden handle. With a quern, a woman can grind her own corn into her own flour at her own hearth, the way women have done since before the Romans, since before anyone. It is banned, absolutely, explicitly banned. Every tenant of the Abbey of St Albans is required by custom, the Abbey calls ancient and the tenants call theft, to bring their corn to the Lord's mill and pay the Lord's toll, 1 measure in every 16, scooped out by the miller before you see a dusting of your own flour. The Abbey's court finds any household caught grinding at home. The Abbey's officers can search, seize the stones, and smash them or carry them away. Your grandmother buried a quern in her day. Your mother dug it up and hid it again in hers. Now it is yours, a flat secret under a floorboard dusted with straw, older than the church tower, and worth a fine of 6pence and the confiscation of the stones if a bailiff ever finds it. 6pence is 6 days of a man's wages. You've used it twice since Hugh died, both times at night, both times with the shutter barred, grinding barley in the dark by feel, slow, so the stone's growl stays low while the children slept. You do not use it when there is any other way, but you know it is there, the way you know where the deep place in the river is, quietly, always. The pottage steams. You wake the children. Alice comes up from sleep the way she does everything, all at once, hair like a hayrick, eyes already asking what day it is and what there is to do in it. Stephen has to be hauled, grumbling, a warm, heavy animal smelling of sleep, and he stands swaying by the fire with his blanket around him like a tiny displaced king while you pull his tunic over his head. The 3 of you eat from wooden bowls with horn spoons, sitting on the bench with your backs to the draught. The pottage is hot and thick and tastes of peas and smoke and yesterday. Stephen gets the most milk swirl from the top because he is smallest. Alice gets the most peas because she will work today. You get what's left, standing, because you are already moving, and eating standing up is a habit so old you no longer notice it. Your mother ate standing. Every woman you have ever known eats standing, last from the smallest bowl. Nobody ever taught you that. Nobody had to. Through the wall you hear the village waking. There is no such thing as privacy in Codicote. The walls are wattle and daub, sticks and clay and cowhair plaster, and you can hear Godwin's rooster, and the clank of a well bucket, and 2 doors down a baby crying. Joan's baby that isn't born yet making Joan sick every morning. So it will be a strong one, Dame Emma says, and under all of it, if the wind sits right, from 6 miles south, a sound like a rumour, the great bells of St Albans Abbey ringing the monks to prime. The largest church in all England, some say in all Christendom north of Rome, calling across the fields to a village it owns. You have heard those bells every day of your life. Your grandmother heard them every day of hers. When the wind is in the south, they are the first thing under everything, like the river. The abbey rings for prayer. Codicote gets up and works, and you should understand, before this day gets going, what work means here, because it is not what the word will come to mean. There is no wage waiting for you, no employer, no shop. There is a holding, 3 acres, a garden, a cottage, 2 children, and a web of dues and debts and duties as fine as anything a spider ever hung between two hedges. Everything you will do today, every single thing from this fire to the last look at the ewe in the evening, is either growing food, making food keepable, turning something into something the rent can be paid with, or keeping alive the people and creatures who do the first three. There are no other categories. There is no task today that is optional. There is only the order you do them in, and the light you have to do them by. The bell of St Giles, your own church, up the rise, squat flint tower, one bell, begins to ring for morning. Old Father Ralph rings it himself, unevenly, because his sexton has a bad shoulder. Alice is already at the door with the yoke and the 2 leather buckets, because the first task of every day, before anything else can happen, is the same task it has been for every woman and every girl, in every village, in every century anyone can count. Water. You take the yoke from her. She carries the small pail instead. And you lift the latch, and the cold morning air comes in over the threshold with the smell of mud and smoke and rain coming, and you step out into the lane, into the village, into the day. One day, then a year, then we'll see. Out you go. The lane is a river of mud with a village around it. You walk on the drier crown of it, in the middle, the way everyone does, stepping around the deep wheel ruts that could swallow a leg to the knee, and you spin as you walk. That needs explaining, because it is the single most constant fact of your existence, and it is invisible to you the way breathing is invisible. Tucked under your left arm is a distaff, a smooth stick wound about with a cloud of combed wool. From it, your fingers draw fibres, twist them, feed them to a dropped spindle that hangs and turns at your knee, and the spindle's weight pulls the twist into thread, and the thread winds on, and the cloud shrinks, and the thread grows, hour by hour, mile by mile. Every woman you know does this. Walking to the well, spinning, standing talking, spinning, watching the pot, minding the goose, waiting for the church door to open, spinning. A woman's hands are never still because thread is never finished. Thread for sewing, thread for the weaver who will make it cloth, thread that can be sold, 12 pence a stone paid for good spun wool by the chapman who comes through from St Albans market. Later centuries will look back and call an unmarried woman a spinster, because spinning is what a woman does with every crack of time between all the other things she does. You have spun since you were 6. Alice has spun since she was 6. Your hands do it in the dark, in the cold, in grief. The thread does not care. The thread just wants to grow. The well stands where the lane widens near the green. A stone lip, a windlass, a bucket on a chain that the whole village pays to keep mended, and a queue. There is always a queue, and the queue is the true parliament of Codicote. Men have the manor court, women have the well. Cecily is there ahead of you, of course. Cecily at Well, who lives up to her name, 34 years old, arms like a carter's from 10 years of hauling mash tunes, a laugh you can hear from the church porch, and a tongue that has been fined twice by the manor court for saying true things loudly. Her husband is a quiet man who mends harrows. Everyone, including him, calls her the master of that house, though never in the hearing of the court. She looks you over the way she does every morning since Mr&Mrs. One quick pass, checking, fed, standing, not weeping. You look like a drowned ewe. Good morrow to you too. I have a brewing on today. She hauls her bucket up, arm over arm, not even breathing hard. The malt sprouted sweet, and if this batch sours, I'll drown myself in the tun. Come and stir after your errand's done. I'll pay you in ale and gossip. I've the croft to dig. The croft will keep an hour, the walk won't. She swings the bucket clear and sets it down and looks at you again, differently, lower. Rent day's coming, Mould. I know what day is coming. How short are you? The queue is around you, Godwin's wife, old Sarah, 2 of the Aylwins, every ear in the Parliament, all of them politely studying the sky. You say it low. 5p. Cecily doesn't blink. Bring your thread to market Saturday and come stir my mash. Which is Cecily for, I will find a way to put pennies near your hand and we'll never speak of it as help. Behind her, Joan has come to the well, moving carefully, one hand under the curve of her belly. Joan is 17, married at Michaelmas to a ploughman twice her size and half her wit, and carrying her first child, due when the hay is due, which everyone agrees is bad planning. She is the colour of whey this morning. Still sick, you ask her. Every dawn. She smiles anyway, because Joan smiles the way other people breathe. Dame Emma says a sick spring means a strong child. Dame Emma says what stops girls crying, Cecily observes. But she takes Joan's pail and fills it herself, and doesn't make anything of it. And Joan pretends her arms aren't grateful, and that is how kindness is done at this well. Sideways, roughly, so it can be denied. You draw your water. 2 leather buckets on the yoke, a stone and a half of weight settling across your shoulders in that old familiar ache, and Alice's small pail besides, and you walk home slow and flat-footed, spinning impossible now, arms occupied, thinking, 5p. The words have lived behind your eyes for a fortnight. Rent is 2 shillings the quarter, 24 silver pence, and in the pot buried by the doorpost you have 19, 5p. A hen is worth a penny halfpenny. The King's own Parliament said so just this winter. That's the strangest news to reach this village in years, and it reached even here. In January at Westminster, the King and his lords set the prices of beasts by law, because food had grown so dear even great men noticed. A fat goose, 2p halfpenny. A capon, 2p. A hen, a penny halfpenny. 24 eggs, 1 penny. You know these numbers the way a priest knows his psalms, because these numbers are your whole margin, and you've turned them over every night since Candlemas. Sell 2 hens, that's 3p, but then fewer eggs forever after, which is eating your seed corn with feathers on. Sell thread instead. Sell the fleece when shearing comes, but shearing comes in June, and rent comes in 8 days. At certain moments you understand, with a clarity that is almost restful, that being poor is not a lack of money. It is arithmetic, done constantly, forever, with no slate and no mistakes allowed. Home, water into the big crock by the door, hens out. They come down off their beam in an indignant flapping rush and out into the croft, where they will spend the day turning worms and kitchen scraps into eggs, which is the closest thing to free money God ever made, and he made it come out of a hen. Alice checks the nesting basket. 2 eggs, brown and warm. Into the straw-lined box they go, toward Saturday, toward the market woman's basket, toward 5p, and then the croft, because the croft is the day. Behind the cottage, running back long and narrow to the boundary ditch, 3 acres of your dead husband's care now yours. Closest to the house, the garden. And mark this, 'cause chroniclers won't. When the accounts of these years are written, men will count the wheat and barley of the great open fields and call that the food of England, and they will barely mention the gardens, and the gardens are what stand between families like yours and the dark. Leeks overwintered in their rows, cabbages, what the slugs and the frost have left, the onion bed waiting, garlic in green spears, the plot where beans go in. Beans, which fill a belly like nothing else. Beans, which even the poorest sow because a sack of dried beans in November is a wall against February. You dig, and the spade is Hugh's spade, iron shod on an ash haft worn to silk where his hands went, and now your hands go there instead, and the ground is heavy and cold and smells of everything that ever rotted sweetly into it. And by the time the sun is properly up, your back has found its daily ache, and Stephen is solemnly carrying stones off the bed one at a time, which is his work, and he does it with the gravity of a man moving cathedrals. Along the south ditch, a strip the length of 10 paces lies raked finer than anything else on the holding waiting. That strip is for flax. Hugh laughed at it every year. A farthing's worth of blue flowers, he called it. You sow it every year anyway, because your mother did. Flax pulled in July, retted in the ditch, broken and combed through the autumn, spun through the winter into linen thread. Fine, pale, the only fine thing your hands ever make. Wool is warmth, but linen is money. A pound of good linen thread is worth more than a day of any man's labour in this village, and it weighs nothing, and it keeps forever, and no bailiff has ever thought to tax a woman's thread box. 10 paces of dirt. Remember it. You will be very glad of that dirt before this story is done. Mid-morning you walk up the lane to the fold to see Whitefoot, your ewe, one ewe, running with the village flock under Roger the shepherd's eye. She is in lamb, wide as a settle, due within the fortnight, and she knows your step and comes shoving along the hurdles for the crust you didn't really save by accident. Her fleece is deep and greasy and full, the year's whole growth of it. At shearing that fleece comes to you. 2 pounds of wool, maybe more, either sold outright to the woolmonger's man, this is England after all, whose wool clothes half of Europe, whose sacks pay for the king's wars, the finest wool in the known world, and some of it grows on the back of a widow's one ewe in Hertfordshire, or kept and carded and spun by your own fire into thread worth half again as much. Whitefoot and her lamb and her fleece are, after the croft, the largest wealth you have. She butts your hand, you scratch the hard bone of her poll, neither of you knows anything about the summer coming, and then Cecily's, because you promised, and because of the pennies. Cecily's house smells like no other house in Codicote. Wet grain, sweetness, smoke, and the sharp ghost of every batch of ale ever brewed in it, soaked into the very daub of the walls. Brewing, you should know, is a woman's trade, almost the only one. Men plough, mow, thresh, carry, but ale, and everyone drinks ale every day, children and grandmothers, because ale is food, thick as barley soup and safer than any water. Ale is made by wives in their own kitchens, sold at their own doors, and the law itself knows them. Ale wives, Brewsters. When a batch is ready, you set a green bush over the door, and the village comes with jugs and pennies come back. It is the one trade where the pennies land in a woman's hand and stay there, more or less. It is also the most fined trade in England. Every manor court reads out its list of Brewsters, immersed a penny or two for weak ale or false measure, so regularly, year upon year, that the fine has quietly become a licence fee, and everyone knows it, and Cecily budgets for it the way she budgets for firewood, and pays it each court day with a curtsy the steward could shave with. Today is mash day. The fire under Cecily's great lead is roaring, the water heating, and the malt. Barley she sprouted on her own floor, turned by hand morning and night for days till it chitted, then dried slow over the kiln, is ground and waiting, sweet as biscuit. You know this work in your hands. Hot water onto malt in the mash tun, then stirring, endless steady stirring with the long paddle while the thick porridge of it steams your face and soaks your wrists, and the sweetness rises and your shoulders burn, and Cecily talks. She talks numbers mostly because Cecily thinks in them. A quarter of malt has cost her 3 shillings and 4pence this spring. A full shilling more than last year, mark that, a shilling, and everyone at the mill grumbling the same, and a quarter of malt, well handled, gives her better than 50 gallons of ale. And ale at the door is 3 farthings a gallon for the good, and a halfpenny for the small. So the batch might bring 3 shillings, and something over the malt if nothing sours, out of which comes wood, and ware, and the inevitable fine, and her labour, which is counted at nothing, because a wife's labour is always counted at nothing. And still, she says, easing the paddle from you, tasting the sweet wort off her knuckle, still it's mine, my malt, my fire, my pennies. When his harrows earn, it's his. When my ale earns, it's mine, until he remembers it isn't. A grin with an edge on it. Learn to brew properly, Mould. I mean it. A widow with a green bush over her door doesn't starve. A widow with your arms, maybe. Arms grow. She looks at you through the steam, and for a moment all the loudness goes out of her and something older and flatter is in her face. Nobody's coming to keep you, girl. That's not cruelty, it's the weather. So keep yourself. Fire, thread, ale, and eggs. That's a woman's 4 walls. Build them. You will hear those words again at the bottom of this year, when everything is thinner and darker, and the price of a quarter of malt has become a number nobody now would believe. Fire, thread, ale, and eggs. Build them. You carry home a penny for the stirring, and a jug of yesterday's ale for the children, and the 5pence has become 4pence still needed, and the sun is past noon, and nobody in this village has yet eaten what you would call a meal, and the day, you understand this, don't you? The day is not half done. The day is barely begun. Dinner, such as it is, happens on your feet in your own doorway. A heel of yesterday's barley bread, a sliver of hard cheese, a pull of Cecily's ale passed between the 3 of you. Alice eats hers sitting on the threshold stone with her spindle still turning. Stephen eats his in fistfuls and wears the rest. And then you gather the sack of barley from the meal chest, balance it on your hip, take Stephen's hand and walk down toward the river. Because this afternoon you must do the thing every soul on this manor hates doing. You must go to the mill. The mill sits below the village where the little river Mimram runs quick between alders, a tall timber box on stone footings, older than anyone, rebuilt piece by piece so many times that the villagers say the only original part is the rent. Its wheel turns with a sound you can hear from 2 fields away, a groan and rush, endless, and inside the 2 great stones ride one upon the other, and everything, beams, ladders, cobwebs, the miller, wears the same ghost-grey coat of flour dust. The miller is Evo, 50, thick through the chest, forearms dusted white, a manner like a door with a good lock on it. Nobody in Codicote likes Evo. This is not about Evo. No village in England likes its miller, because no man in the village stands where Evo stands, between every family and its flour, with his hand and his toll dish in every sack. The Abbey owns the mill. Evo farms it, pays the Abbey its fat rent, and lives off the multure, the toll, 1 measure in every 16, struck off with his own wooden dish before your grain touches the stones. And every wife who watches that dish dip and level and empty has done the same arithmetic in the dark of her own skull. Was that a fair scoop? Was the dish honest? 16 sacks in a year, and one of them is his. And who measured the dish, and who checks the man who checks it? That's why the quern sleeps under your floor. That's why the abbey hunts querns like sin. Every handful a woman grinds at home is a handful that never pays toll, and the abbot's court calls that theft from the Lord, and the wives of St Albans manors have called it something else for 200 years, quietly at Wells with the shutter barred. This is an old, old war, older than your grandmother, and it is not finished. Mark this. It will outlive everyone in this story, and one day, 16 years from now, an abbot will make his answer to it in a way nobody kneeling in this village today could imagine. But that is for later. Today there is only the queue under the eaves, and the wheel groaning an Evo's dish. You wait behind 2 men with a cart, they go first. You had no expectation otherwise. A woman with 1 sack on her hip waits behind men with carts the way water runs downhill. When your turn comes, Evo takes the sack, weighs it with a look, strikes his toll. You watch the dish. He knows you watch. Every wife watches, and he has stopped noticing being watched, the way the river has stopped noticing rain. And your barley roars away into the hopper and comes back to you as meal, warm, smelling like a field in August, 1/16 lighter. He ties the sack himself, which he does not do for everyone. Widow? A nod. Nothing else. From Evo, that is nearly a speech. He lost his own wife 6 winters back. Whatever the village says of his dish, he has never once taken the wrong measure from you since Martinmas, and you have counted. You nod back. Between people who will never like each other, exactness is its own kind of decency. From the mill down along the bank to the washing place, because you have the river and daylight, and washing waits for the coincidence of both. On flat stones where the current runs clean over gravel, you kneel with the household's linen, smocks, Stephen's everything, the wimples, the sheet. Wet it. Soap it with a grey-green paste of ashes and mutton fat that Dame Emma renders every winter and every household buys. Fold it on the stone and beat it with a wooden bat over and over, your whole shoulder into it, whack, 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 echoing off the alders, while the cold of the river climbs your arms into your elbows and your knuckles crack and sting. There is a reason washing happens rarely and is reckoned heavy labour, up there with haymaking. By the 3rd smock your hands are scalded scarlet with cold, and you can no longer feel the bat's handle, only its jolt, in the bones of your wrist. And while you kneel there, wringing, you check the other thing, the thing under the bank. 10 steps downstream, where the current tucks under a hollow lip of root and shadow, a woven willow funnel lies staked in the water, narrow-throated, wide-mouthed, invisible unless you know. Hugh made it the summer before he died, sitting in the doorway with withies soaking in a bucket, laughing that a man who owed the Abbey 3 days a week had a right to what swam past his own washing stone. He was wrong about that, is the thing. The fishery is the Lord's. Every eel in this river already belongs in law to the Abbot of St Albans, and taking them is a matter for the court, and the trap is one more quiet illegality sleeping in the water, like the quern sleeping under the floor. You have not lifted it since he died. You keep meaning to pull it out and let it go to ruin, because a widow holding by widow right cannot afford a fine, cannot afford to be seen, cannot afford anything. But you kneel there with your dead husband's willow work under your eyes, and you do not pull it out. You tell yourself, later. The trap stays, staked in the dark water, waiting for a hungrier year than this one. It will not have to wait long. You're spreading the wet linen on the hawthorns to dry when Walter finds you. You hear him before you see him. Walter the Reeve walks like a man counting his own footsteps, and in a sense he is. 50 years old, grey as a January sky, a face folded into permanent creases of arithmetic. Reeve is the office nobody quite wants, a villager, one of you. Chosen to run the Lord's manor for the Lord, to see the ploughing done and the boon summoned and the rents in, answerable upward to the Abbey's steward and cellarer, answerable downward to nobody, trusted fully by neither. 15 years Walter has carried it. It shows the way water shows on stone. Widow Atterwell. He plants himself, takes out his knife, and takes from his scrip a bundle of split hazel sticks, thumbing through them like a priest through prayers. Tally sticks. This is how the manor remembers, because parchment is for the Abbey, and neither you nor Walter can read it. A stick split down its length, notches cut across both halves at once, one half for the reeve, one for the tenant. A day's boon work owed, a notch, a day rendered, a notch crossed. When the two halves are laid together, stick against stick, notch against notch, they cannot lie, and no clerk, no steward, no lord can add a notch to one half that the other half doesn't show. It is the shrewdest thing anyone ever did with a stick, and half of England runs on it. He finds yours, you know it by the burn mark on the bark, and holds it up. Lady Day, he says, the rent, and the spring boon after, 2 days' work to the Lord at the sowing from this holding, Hugh's days, yours now. I know my days. I know you know them. He turns the stick in his fingers, not looking at you. I'll say this once, and if you repeat it, I'll call you a liar in open court. The steward's clerk asked at Michaelmas whether the widow could do her services, or whether the holding should come back to the Lord's hand. I told him the widow does her services better than her man did, God rest him. And the clerk wrote what I said, and what the clerk writes down stays written. Now he looks at you. So render your days when I summon you. Pay your rent to the hour it's due. Keep your 2 halves of every stick, and give no man in a black robe a reason to ask about you twice. A widow on this manor lives by being dull to look at, Mould. Be dull. He crosses no notch, grants no grace, offers nothing that cost the Abbey a farthing. And he has just in his flat grey way told you he stood between your children and the road, and will go on standing there exactly as long as you give him arithmetic he can defend. You take your half of the tally from him, your half, yours to keep, and keep it you will in the thread box with the needles, and you will have cause to bless that habit before the year turns, and you say the only thing that is safe to say. I'll be dull. See that you are. And he has gone up the bank, counting his footsteps, onto the next stick. The light is going long and low by the time the linen is gathered in, stiff and river-smelling, and there is still the evening's whole hill to climb. Hens in and counted 3. Whitefoot glanced at over the hurdles, heavy and calm. Kale cut, water fetched again, because water is always again. The pottage rebuilt on the fire with the morning's leavings and an onion and a knuckle of the bacon that must last, God helping it, to Whitsun. And it is full dusk, blue in the doorway, when Dame Emma comes. She never knocks. She is simply in the doorway, the way weather is. A small woman gone the colour and shape of a thorn root, 60 winters old at the very least. She claims not to know and enjoys not knowing, with a canvas satchel on her hip that the whole parish could describe with its eyes shut. Dame Emma delivered you. She delivered Alice and Stephen, and half the living population of this village, and a full third of the churchyard. Midwife, herb wife, layer out of the dead, the woman who is sent for at both doors of life, first breath and last. What she knows did not come from books. No book would have her, and she'd have no book. It came down hand to hand, hearth to hearth, from her own mistress, who had it the same way, back and back past memory. Feverfew for headaches, willow bark boiled bitter for aches and heats, comfrey, knit bone she calls it, pounded for wraps, poppy head tea, counted in drops, for pain that cannot otherwise be borne. Where the priest's Latin ends and the body begins, there is Emma. She sets the satchel down, looks at Stephen's chapped cheeks, at Alice's spindle, at the pot, at you, one flick each, a whole examination. Joan's babe sits high and she carries wide, she says, in the voice of a woman continuing a conversation she was having with herself in the lane. Hay time, that one, as I said. I'll want another pair of hands at that bed when it comes, steady ones. A pause, precisely as long as it needs to be. Yours. The fire pops. You look at her. I've caught lambs, Emma. Never a child. You've been in the room 4 times. She counts your own life at you on her fingers. Twice for your sister's, twice your own, and you didn't screech nor faint nor pray in the wrong places, any of them. I'm old, girl. My knees are old. My hands are good, but they're old, and this parish will not always have me, and what I carry doesn't keep in a jar. She takes up her satchel, already half turned for the door, and delivers the rest to the dark outside. The church buries you, and the manor taxes you, and neither one will sit up all night with you when your time comes. Women keep women, Mould. That's the whole of the physic I know. The rest is herbs. And she is gone, into the blue, to sup with a goddaughter, leaving the words sitting by your fire like a cat that has decided to stay. You bar the door. You bank the fire, heaping the ash just so, setting the clay curfew over the red heart of it. The fire must not die. And you lie down in the wide bed with a child breathing on either side of you, Alice's cold feet finding your shins, Stephen's fist wound into your smock, and the wind moves in the thatch, and a fox screams somewhere up toward the wood, and 6 miles south too far to hear. The monks of St Albans rise in the black of the night to sing matins in the largest church in England under a tower of Roman brick, praying for the souls of the living and the dead, among them, in a general way, yours. 19 pence in the pot, 4 pence to find. 2 days owed at the sowing, an egg basket filling towards Saturday, a ewe due to lamb, a birth bed promised in hay time, a quern under the floor, a trap in the river, a tally in the thread box. That is what a poor woman did all day. Tomorrow she'll do it again. Sleep now while she can. She's earned it. So have you. But before we let the seasons turn, and they are about to turn harder than anyone in this village can imagine, you should see the world she almost never sees. Because on Saturday, Mould goes to market. On Saturday, she walks the 6 miles to St Albans, with eggs and thread and a jug, into the shadow of the 3rd greatest abbey in Christendom. And Saturday is where this story truly begins to move. Saturday comes grey and dry, which is all anyone asks of a market day. You are on the road before full light with Cecily and 2 other village women, because women do not walk 6 miles alone if they can help it, and because the walk itself is half the holiday. On your back, a basket, 4 dozen eggs packed in straw, 2 hens trussed and furious, 3 pounds of spun wool thread wound in neat clews, and the jug for salt. Alice walks beside you, carrying the smaller basket at her own first thread, uneven, lumpy in places hers, and her eyes are already 6 miles ahead. Stephen stays with Joan, who cannot walk so far now, and is glad of the excuse of him. The road south runs with the little river a while. then climbs through fields where the winter wheat stands green and thin, and everywhere the road itself thickens with company as the lanes feed into it. Carts of hurdles, a man driving pigs, women like yourselves with baskets, a friar, a tinker with his pans clashing like soft bells. Everyone is going where you are going. On a Saturday, all roads in this corner of Hertfordshire are one road, and it runs to St Albans. And then you top the last rise and there it is. Every time it takes your breath away. The Abbey Tower stands up over the valley of the Wear like something that arrived before the hills and will be leaving after them. 140 feet of it and more, square and enormous, and it is red. That's the thing no stranger expects. Red-brown Roman brick, because when Abbot Paul of Caen raised it, 240 years ago now, in the decades after the conquest, his builders quarried nothing. They carried the bricks and flint of the dead Roman city of Verulamium up from the valley floor, the actual rubble of the actual city where Alban himself was martyred 1,000 years before, and they stacked an empire's leavings into a tower for God. The church beneath it runs near 300 feet at the nave alone, the longest in England. You believe it without measuring. Everything in you believes it on sight. You were 7 the first time you saw it. You gripped your mother's hand and asked if it was where God lived, and she laughed and said no, it was where the abbot lived. And it took you years to understand everything folded up inside that answer. Because that tower is your landlord. Not like God is, in a general way over all things, directly in the way of rents and tallies and toll dishes. The abbot of that church holds Codicote, your croft, your lane, your mill, the fish in your river and the notches on your stick. The wool on your back and the eggs in this basket are before anything else the abbey's arithmetic. Men in that tower's shadow whom you will never meet have written your husband's death in a roll and the Heriot cow beside it. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen, and you have never once looked at it without also, somewhere underneath, counting. The town swallows you at St. Peter's Street. 300 households throng today to bursting, and the market runs down the wide triangle of the marketplace in ranks of stalls and ground cloths. The corn market up at one end, then butchers' shambles, fishmongers with their salt herring, the wool and cloth rows, sellers of pots, of shoes, of pins and ribbons and rope, and everywhere the smells fighting, fish and blood and bread, tar and dung, and cutting through all of it from the cook shop rows, hot pastry and spiced fat, the single most beautiful smell in the created world when you have walked 6 miles on a heel of bread. Now watch her work, because this too is what a poor woman did all day, and she was better at it than most men would care to know. The eggs go fast and simply, a penny the 2 dozen, the ordinance's own price, to a townswoman who peers at every 4th egg against the light and pretends she might not buy until the exact moment she buys. The hens go to a cook-shop woman after a bout of head-shaking on both sides, 2pence halfpenny the pair. But the thread is where the day is won or lost, so you take the thread not to the general row, but to the chapman Lambert, whom your mother sold to before you, a narrow man with weighing scales in his eyes, who buys spun thread from 50 parishes and carries it to the weavers. He unwinds an arm's length of your clue, holds it to the light, runs it through his fingers for slubs, snaps it once between his fists. Even enough, which from Lambert is court poetry. 10pence the 3 pound. You look at him the way you look at rain in haytime. It's combed wool, evenly twisted, and you'll sell it inside the week. 14. 14. He says the word to the sky, calling it to witness. The Flemish looms are quiet, woman. The wool trade's all war taxes and pirates. I'm robbing my own children at 11. Then rob them at 13 and tell them it was me. A townsman behind you snorts. Lambert's mouth does not move, but his eyes concede the point on its merits. 12, and the same for every clue you bring me spun like this, the year round, and I'll take the child's too. He has seen Alice's thread without seeming to look at it, seen everything about it. At 8 the stone rate for practice thread. She'll be at your rate in 2 years. Done. 12 pence. 4 days of a ploughman's wages lying in your palm in 3 silver coins, for wool spun in the cracks of time between everything else, and a market for Alice's thread, which is worth more than the pennies. You see her holding her own first halfpenny like a relic, and something in your chest tightens and loosens at once. Done. Salt, then? Coarse grey salt from the salt cellars, 4p worth filling the jug, and even at 4p the seller grumbles that salt is tightening. The rains along the coast this past year drowned the salt pan's fires. Remember that grumble? A candle of real beeswax, 1, a farthing, for Our Lady's altar at St. Giles, because your mother always bought one, and you're not yet poor enough to stop, and a farthing's worth of hot pie shared 3 ways in the lee of the market cross, eaten standing, watching the crowd, which is the finest entertainment in Hertfordshire. Cecily reappears out of the press with an empty basket, a full purse, and the light of successful commerce upon her. Alice has seen a man with the dancing dog, and will be describing it until Whitsun. And on the way out of town you do the thing you always do, that costs nothing. You stand a moment at the Abbey gatehouse, where the great court opens toward the church, close enough to hear the singing seep out of the stone. 7 years ago, when you were carrying Alice, they finished the new shrine for St. Alban, a marvel of carved Purbeck marble, they say, the saint's bones lifted onto it with the king himself in the church to watch. That was 1308. You have never seen it. Villains' wives do not wander into the presbytery among the pilgrims of quality, but you have stood at this gate maybe 40 times in your life, listening, and the singing does not care what you hold or render or owe. It falls on you the same as on the abbot. It is the one thing in St. Albans that has never once been counted. Then the road home, 6 miles, downhill in the heart if not underfoot, with rent money whole in the purse against your ribs, 24 pence and 3p over. You are for this 1 week a woman of 3p, and Alice asleep on her feet by the last mile, and the tower behind you holding up the first stars. Lady Day comes. You stand in the queue at the manor barn and pay your 2 shillings into the steward's clerk's box, and watch the clerk write, and Walter watches the clerk write, and your name passes another quarter day in the Abbey's parchment memory, rendered in full on the day, dull to look at, exactly as promised. And then April does what April does, and for 3 weeks this story is almost happy, so take it, the year owes you this part. Whitefoot lambs on a cold, bright morning, quick and clean, a ewe lamb up and butting within the hour, and Roger the shepherd, who has caught lambs for 40 years and has the hands of a bishop doing it, grins his 3 teeth at you across the hurdles and says she's a good mother, your ewe, which you repeat to the children at supper as if it were news of a victory at sea. The sowing boons are rendered. 2 long days on the Lord's land, you and Alice among the village women with seed aprons full of barley, casting broadside up and down the furrows behind the harrows, arms aching in that deep way that stays till morning. Walter crosses 2 notches on your tally against your 2 on yours, stick to stick, no words needed. Your own croft takes its seed too. Beans in, barley in, onions in. And on a soft grey evening you kneel at the end of the south ditch and sow the flax strip, casting the sleek brown seed thin and even, and rake it, and stand a moment with your back complaining, and think of Hugh saying a farthing's worth of blue flowers, and find you can think it without the floor of your chest giving way. That's new, that's April. Emma begins taking you with her, to a lying in at the far end of the parish, not to do, just to stand, to hold, to watch her hands and learn where her hands learn to be, to gather, on the field edges, into the satchel, young nettles, coltsfoot, the first elder leaves, willow bark peeled in strips from the pollards by the river, each with its name and its use and its warning, and she makes you say them back like a catechism, and cuffs your shoulder, not gently when you shorten anything. Herbs are exact or they are nothing, girl. And Joan grows wider and pinker and sturdier, and laughs at her own waddle at the well, and Cecily's new batch comes in sweet and strong under its green bush, and the wheat in the great fields comes on thick and green as a psalm. Stand here a moment. Look at it. The village green going gold in the evening, the fields full, the fold full, the year turning fat and ordinary. Every woman you know is planning by it, counting on it, promising by it. The harvest, the fleece, the hay, the wed nails of autumn. It is the last few weeks of the old world, and nobody in it knows. Whitsun falls in the middle of May, with garlands at the church door and Cecily's ale at the church ale after, and it rains that week, which no one minds, because May rain is bred in the ground, the saying goes. It does not stop, not that week, not the week after, not in any way that matters for the rest of this story. You need to understand what rain means here, because it does not mean what it means to you. Warm behind glass, there is no glass. There is a door, a shutter, and a roof of straw. When rain sets in, the village does not close. It cannot close. The fire still needs wood, and the wood is wet. The hens still need minding, and the run is a marsh. The water must still be fetched, though the sky is delivering it, because the well is clean, and the sky, by the time it has run off a thatch full of birds and through a yard full of dung, is not. Wet wool is heavy as gilt and dries by the fire in a fog of steam that makes the whole cottage smell like a sheep with a fever. Shoes never dry. Feet whiten and soften and split at the heels. Stephen's chilblains come back in June, and Emma's comfrey salve fights them to a draw at best. And this rain is not weather. Slowly, week by sodden week, the village understands that it is something else. It rains through the end of May. It rains through June, not showers, but standing grey days of it, one after another, the clouds coming up out of the southwest like carts in an endless train, unloading, moving on, replaced. The Mimram rises and stays risen, brown and pushy, over the washing stones. You beat your linen now on the upper stones, when there is any point beating linen at all. The lanes become the kind of mud that pulls a shoe from your foot with a sound like a kiss. In the great fields the young barley yellows in the standing water at every furrow's low end, and the wheat, which stood so thick in April, goes thin and pale and lodges in patches, beaten flat, as if some huge animal had rolled on it in the night. At first everyone says the same things. Wet years come. St. Swithin manages these matters. It will burn off by hazel. There is a whole liturgy of such sayings, and the village works through it, verse by verse, and the rain falls on all of it alike. It is the hay that teaches you what year this is going to be. hazel, hay harvest, is the hinge of the whole farming year. The meadows along the river, the richest ground on the manor, are cut in high summer, and the grass lies drying in the sun, turned and turned again until it is hay. Winter's food for every ox, every plough beast, every sheep in the fold. No hay, no beasts, no beasts, no plough. No plough, no bread, not this year but next. That is how famine actually works, you see. It is never one bad harvest. It is the way one wet summer reaches its hand 2 years forward. The Lord's meadows are cut between the rains, because there is nothing else to do. You render your boon days there with every woman in the village, spreading and turning the swathes with wooden rakes, and the work which in a good year is the near holiday of the summer, meadow, sun, ale at the Lord's expense, singing. Is this year a flat grey labour of hauling wet grass through wet air, turning it not to dry it, for nothing dries, but to keep it from rotting where it lies. It rots anyway. Whole swathes of it go black and slick and sweet stinking like tea leaves, like the floor of an autumn wood, and the men fork the ruined stuff to the ditches and the women turn what's left. And Walter stands in the rain counting what will not be enough, with his creases folded deeper than you have ever seen them. The Lord's hay half fails, and everyone's hay half fails, and every household on the manor does the same arithmetic that autumn will make brutally simple. Some of the beasts cannot be wintered, which is why, from July on, there begin to be too many beasts for sale in every market in England at once. And why, pin this fact to the wall of your mind, the King's careful ordinance of prices, made in January when the trouble was dearness, is already dissolving into black comedy, because prices are not obeying Parliament, prices are obeying rain. In the middle of all this, in hay-time exactly as Emma foretold, on a night of warm loud rain, Joan's boy decides to be born. It is your first birth as a pair of hands and not a bystander, and it is 14 hours, and you will remember it in pieces for the rest of your life. The birthing room hot as a mash tun, shutter stuffed with straw, fire built up because a labouring woman must never take a chill, water heated and heated again in the largest pot in the lane, the other wives in and out with the practised calm of a guild at its mystery, because birth here is women's ground entire. No husband crosses that threshold, no priest unless it is going wrong past mending, and Emma is master of the room, the way the abbot is master of his church. You hold Joan up under the arms through the worst of it, her whole weight hanging on you, her fingers printing bruises you'll wear a fortnight, and Emma talks the whole time, low and steady and unstoppable, a river of sense. Rest now, breathe now, scream if it helps. Screaming's free, and you do what her eyes tell you before her mouth does. And somewhere in the smallest hours you stop being afraid and become simply useful, which is Emma's whole religion. And then there is a fish-slippery, furious scrap of a person in Emma's hands, and then a cry. And the room, 6 exhausted women in wet-hot linen, makes one sound together, quiet, that you have no word for. It is the sound the whole species has been making at that moment since before villages. 60 generations deep, that sound. The boy is baptized Peter within the day, at the church door, small and outraged, because in this world you do not wait to baptize. Joan comes through it whole. Emma, walking home with you at dawn through the streaming lanes, dead tired, satchel slack, says only, "Steady hands," as I said. And then, because it is Emma, next one you'll catch. Beyond the birthing room door the summer keeps failing. By late July, the talk at the well has changed key. Wheat is climbing past anything the old people can match against memory. The quarter that sold for 5 shillings when this story began stands at 8, then 10 in the corn market at St Albans, and climbing, and the harvest visibly drowning in the fields promises no relief on the far side of it. And now the sellers' faces are changing too. The salt woman was right. Salt has doubled and worse. No sun on the coast, no fire under the sodden salt pans, no salt, and no salt market means no way to keep meat through the winter. So even killing the beast you cannot feed becomes a race against rot. Everything connects to everything. That is what these months teach the whole kingdom, lesson by lesson, price by price. Bread to hay, hay to salt, salt to plague among the sheep, for the murrain is beginning in the wet folds, flocks coughing and rotting from the feet upward, whole hundreds lost in the worst-drained country, and all of it back to the same grey sky. The church does what the church does. The bishops order processions, barefoot, fasting, the parish behind the cross around the sodden fields, psalms against the weather, and Codicote walks its bounds in the rain behind old Father Ralph, whose voice cracks on the misereres, and you walk in it with Stephen on your hip and Alice's hand in yours, mud to the ankles, singing to the clouds. You believe, more or less, the way everyone believes, the way you believe in the river. It is simply there. But you notice, you cannot help noticing, that the sky is not listening, and you look sideways along the line of wet singing faces and see your neighbours noticing too, and that is its own kind of cold. August, and one small dry mercy. Between rains you pull the flax. It has come through better than the corn. Flax will forgive wet ground that wheat won't. And you and Alice pull it in armfuls by the roots, tie it, and sink the bundles in the boundary ditch under stones to ret, the water working the fibres loose from the stalk. Hugh's farthing of blue flowers, safe under water while the wheat drowns in the open. You will not forget the lesson. And the eel trap comes up out of the river at last. You lift it on an August evening with your heart going like a coney's, because the river is the Lord's and the fine is real. 3 eels, thick as your wrist, furious and shining. You kill and split and hot smoke them over the fire that night with the shutter barred. Eel is meat, eel is fat, eel is winter strength. And eel, unlike bacon, asks no salt you cannot afford. From that week on you lift the trap at each dark of the moon, and Alice learns to scrub and restake it, and you both learn to say nothing to anyone, and one evening at the fold Roger the shepherd passes you with his nose working. Wood smoke and eel fat cling to wool, and shepherds miss nothing, and says to the middle distance that it's a wise fish nowadays that keeps to deep water, which is Roger telling you he knows, and that knowing in Roger goes no further. The village is becoming a web of such silences. Hunger has not arrived yet, not truly, but everyone can hear it on the road, and the village is quietly deciding, hedge by hedge, whose side it will be on when it comes. And then, in the 2nd week of August, word runs up the road from St Albans, passed hand to hand like fire along a thatch, so strange that people laugh before they believe it. The king is coming to the Abbey, and the king cannot find bread. You're in St Albans when it happens, because it is a Saturday around the feast of St Lawrence, the 10th day of August, the year of grace 1315, and Saturday is market, rain or shine, or the end of the world, and you have thread for Lambert and pennies to turn over, because rent does not care whose banner is on the road. The town is wrong from the moment you come down St Peter's Street. too full, too loud, and strung through with colours that do not belong to it. Liveried men, royal purveyors' carts, grooms leading strings of tall horses through a market crowd that gives way before them like water before a barge, sergeants at the corners with white wands of office and no patience whatsoever. Edward, the second of that name, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Aquitaine, is at the Abbey with his household. The great machine of the itinerant court, hundreds of mouths that move about the kingdom eating it, provisioned by purveyors with the right to buy at the king's price whatever the countryside has. And the countryside has nothing. You hear it first as comedy, the way it ran up the road. They can't find bread for the king's own table. Men repeat it grinning, the way people grin at a bishop slipping in the mud. But standing in the corn market end of the marketplace, wedged between Cecily and a pie stall with Alice's hand locked in yours, you watch it stop being funny in the space of an hour. Because the purveyors are at the baker's stalls and the baker's boards are bare. Not dear, bare. The rain has been eating the old crop since May. The new crop is flat and sprouting in the fields. Every quarter of sound milling wheat between here and Luton has been chased up by dealers these 3 weeks past, and the assize loaf, understand this little machine, it matters. By the law called the assize of bread, a farthing loaf is always a farthing. It is the loaf itself that shrinks as wheat climbs. So all summer every woman in Hertfordshire has watched her farthing buy a smaller and smaller piece of the world. The assize loaf has shrunk to a thing you can close one hand around. And now the king's men stand in front of empty boards in their good cloth, with the king's silver in their fists and the king's wand of office in their hands, and the silver cannot become bread because the bread does not exist. You stand at the edge of the press. This is as near as this story will ever put you to a king, and it is near enough. And you see what a crowd looks like when a truth lands on it all at once, bodily, the way weather lands. A murmur with a shiver in it. Men look at each other's faces the way they'd look at a cracked church wall. If it can crack, what else can crack? Because this is the thing that even the barefoot processions had not yet taught, the thing that reaches every soul in that marketplace in the same cold heartbeat. If the king's own money cannot buy bread, then money does not command bread. Then nothing commands bread. Then the dearness is not the merchant's wickedness, which laws can whip, nor the ordinance's failure, which Parliament can mend. It is the sky, and the sky is over everyone, and there is no flaw under this year at all. What follows is not a riot. You will be glad of that all your life. You have Alice's hand in yours and the crowd packed to your shoulders, and for 100 breaths the whole marketplace stands balanced on the edge of something with no name, while a baker's man is pressed back against his own empty board, and a sergeant's horse sidles and stamps, and a woman somewhere behind you begins loudly, wetly weeping over a basket that will not be filled. Your heart bangs. Cecily's hand closes on your arm like a mash paddle, and then the crowd tips the other way, into a scramble, not a fight, a squalid, elbowing, pushing run on everything eatable left in that market. Peas, beans, salt fish, cheese, old beans, seed beans, anything. You see a respectable townswoman in a good wimple fight a carter actually fight him over a half sack of oatmeal in the open street in front of God and the king's sergeants, and you see the sergeants do nothing because there is nothing to be done that would not make it worse. And you do what the poor do, which the chronicles never trouble to write down. You were already moving. You had your farthings out before the crowd tipped. You are small and quick, and you've been hungry before. and while the wimpled woman and the carter perform their tragedy, you've got 2 pecks of grey peas, a bag of vetches the seller himself half scorns to charge for, and a wedge of hard-used cheese, and you have paid true coin for all of it, and are out of the press with your back to a wall and both children of your heart accounted for. Alice at your skirt, wide-eyed, printing this day word for word into the woman she will be at 80, telling it by another fire in another reign. Lambert takes your thread even today, trade is trade, and pays your 12 pence with the first shaken look you have ever seen on that unshakable face. Sell nothing you can eat, widow, he says, counting the coins out slow. Not this year. Thread, ale, wool, sell what you like of that. Sell what you... but nothing you can eat, and tell your village the same. You walk home through the wet, green evening, the 4 of you close together without anyone having said to walk close, past fields of standing rain, and behind you the Abbey Tower stands over the drowned valley exactly as it stood over the dry one, red and eternal, ringing vespers for a king who dined that day. The whole shire will tell it for years, and a monk of St Albans will write it down so that 700 years from now it is still known. A king who dined poorly, in the greatest abbey in England, in the fattest corner of his kingdom, because bread could scarcely be found for his household. At the top of the last rise, where the lane turns down toward Codicote, Walter the Reeve is standing in the drizzle as if he'd grown there, waiting for the market-goers, gathering the day from each group as it passes. You tell him what you saw, all of it. The empty boards, the purveyors, the scramble, the wimpled woman, Lambert's counsel. He listens the way he counts, without moving, to the end. So, he says, just that for a while. His creases are still, then. Now you know what year this is. You've seen it with your own eyes, which is better than believing it. He turns to go, then stops, and says the rest to the hedge, in his flat grey voice. And it is the closest thing to a sermon anyone will preach in this story. Kings eat last of all men, widow. That's what today means, if it means anything. There's no floor under this year but the one we build each other. A pause. Get your peas in dry. Court sits at Michaelmas. Be dull. And he walks off into the rain, counting his footsteps, an ageing man with a bundle of notched sticks going to hold a village together with them. You bar your door that night with the peas and vetches in the meal chest, the cheese wrapped high out of mouse reach, the children asleep, the fire banked under its clay dome, and you lie awake a long time, listening to the rain on the thatch, doing the arithmetic. It is a long list now, and you know it the way Father Ralph knows the Mass. But the list holds. That is the thing, and you know it clearly, lying there. It holds. Not by luck. It holds because of everything this year has already made you build. The thread money, the eels, the flax in the ditch, the peas bought quick while others gaped, the tally kept, the quern kept, the friends kept. The worst day so far, and your children went to bed fed. Hold on to that. She did. Now breathe, because the fair is over, and the long game begins, and the rest of this story belongs to the quiet, stubborn machinery of getting through, which is, and always was, the true answer to what poor women really did all day. The harvest of 1315 is got in the way a drowning man is got out of a river, late, grey, and half gone. The village takes it between rains in a kind of grim relay, whole families in the great fields at once, because when 3 dry hours open in the sky you use all of them or mourn them. The wheat comes to the sickle flattened and tangled, half the ears sprouted in the stalk, grown, the kernels already quickened by the wet into pale little tails, which means flour that bakes sticky and grey, and loaves that sit in the belly like river clay. The barley's better, barely. The oats are best, which is a joke with a bitter rim to it, because oats were always the poor grain, horse corn, and this year the poor grain is the year's aristocrat. You render your harvest boons on the Lord's land, sickle in hand, Hugh's sickle whetted thin, your palm now hardened into its curve, and you take your wage in sheaves like the other boon workers, and every sheaf is watched, weighed with eyes, walked home like a christening child. And after the carts you glean. Gleaning is the oldest rite there is. When the sheaves are carried, the poor may walk the stubble and take what the reapers missed, ear by dropped ear. It is real law, manor law. Walter each year names who may glean, widows and the old and the fatherless first. And it is real food, and none of that is what you remember afterward. What you remember is the posture, bent double from the hips, skirts knotted up, left hand a claw around the gathered stalks, right hand picking, eyes forever 18 inches from the stubble that scores your wrists in thin white lines, moving up the field slower than a shadow moves, straightening only when your back refuses, and the field full of women in exactly that shape, dotted to the hedges like a letter written in bent women on a grey page. 3 days of it, you and Alice together, for maybe 2 pecks of mixed ears. In a fat year, gleaning is thrift. This year it is the margin itself, and everyone knows it, and nobody bent in that stubble says so because saying so feeds nobody. Every ear goes into the loft, and at night, this is the autumn, the quern comes fully awake. Because here is the little cruelty inside the great one. The mill takes its toll in grain, 1 measure in 16, rain or shine. But this year every 16th measure is blood. So all over this manor, all over every manor in England, the buried stones are coming up from under floors, and the Abbey knows it the way it always knows, and the court rolls of these famine years will fill with quern fines the way a net fills in a spawning run. You grind at the dark of the moon, the nights you lift the eel trap, doing the 2 crimes together since each covers the other's noise. Shutter barred, fire low, Alice feeding the eye of the stone a handful at a time while you drive the handle round and round and round. A low granite growl you feel in your teeth, and the meal comes out grey and coarse and entirely invisibly yours. An hour's grinding for a day's bread. Your shoulder aches by the end like a boon day. It is the finest ache you own. Michaelmas brings the manor court, the whole village packed into the great barn that smells of this year's thin harvest, and the court does its immemorial business in its immemorial drone. And then the steward's clerk, a new man this year, young with a face like an unpaid bill, reads out that the widow Atterwell rendered 1 day short at the autumn boons, and the barn goes quiet in a way you feel on your skin. A day's default for a widow holding by widow right in this of all years, in front of this of all clerks. This is how holdings come back into the Lord's hand, not with soldiers, with an entry in a roll. You stand up. Your heart is going like Cecily's paddle, but your voice, thank every saint at once, comes out flat and dull, exactly as instructed. You say your days were rendered in full and tallied, and you take from your apron your half of the hazel tally and hand it up, and Walter at the steward's side without a flicker produces its brother from his bundle, and the 2 halves are laid together in the steward's own hands, stick to stick, before the whole assembled village, every notch crossed, wood answering wood, grain answering grain, no gap, no lie, no debt. The steward looks at the sticks for a long moment. Then he looks at his clerk, and what is in that look keeps the barn silent for 3 more heartbeats. The entry is amended. The court moves on, Brewster's next. Cecily, immersed 2pence for ale sold before the tasters came, pays it with the annual curtsy honed now to such an edge that even the steward's mouth twitches. Outside, after, Walter passes you without stopping. Dull, he says, to the air between you, and it carries everything a fatter man would need a speech for. You walk home with your half-stick in your fist like a relic. Fire, thread, ale and eggs, Cecily said. Add wood to that. Split hazel, kept dry, kept close. A poor woman's charter is a stick with notches in it, and this year you learn to hold it like one. October runs down in rain and work. The flax comes up out of the ditch, retted and rank, a smell like drowned summer, and drees in bundles under the eaves, and then, through the shortening evenings, you and Alice break it and scutch it, and pull it through the iron-toothed comb, hackling the fibres down to their long pale silk, and the thread box begins to fill with the fine linen that Lambert's eyes priced through, the wrapping the first time you brought it, even and pale, woman, all of it like that, mind, at a rate that made the wool thread look like chaff. 10 paces of dirt. Hugh, love, you were wrong about the farthing, and being wrong never fed anyone so well. The pig-killing month comes with hardly a pig to kill, and half the salt to spare for what there is. Salt stands now at 4 and 5 times its old price where it can be found at all, and Emma, who remembers everything, teaches the lane's women the old poverties, smoke-drying the eel way, hard-rendering fat, burying roots in sand. The moraine reaches the parish flocks in November, and Roger fights it like a man bailing a boat, folding the sound sheep high on the driest chalk, and Whitefoot, whose June fleece, clipped in that one kind dry week and stored in the loft, is already becoming rent thread on your spindle evening by evening. Whitefoot coughs for a fortnight and frightens you sick, and lives. Her lamb, now a sturdy shearling, lives too. Roger's counting by Advent is grimmer. 1 sheep in 4, gone. Yours are 2 of the ones that stayed. Nobody earned that. You know better now than to think this year distributes by earning, and wheat at the Advent markets passes 20 shillings the quarter, 4 times the price at which this story opened. The old people have stopped reaching for comparisons. The figure is its own comparison now, and next summer it will look kind. Christmas comes anyway. That is perhaps the strangest sentence in this whole year, and the truest. The holly goes up in St. Giles because it always goes up. Father Ralph preaches the light in the darkness with his cracked voice and means it. The Lord's Christmas dole to his tenants is thinner than custom, but it comes. Custom holds, groaning like the church roof, and on the day itself the lane eats together, pooled. Cecily's strong ale, your smoked eel and grey flour loaves, Joan's brawn, Emma's honey, 1 fire, everyone's children underfoot in the rushes. Stephen, 5 now, sings the one carol he knows 6 times over standing on the bench, conducted by Alice with a wooden spoon, to an acclaim out of all proportion to the performance. You laugh that day. Actually laugh, head back. You notice yourself doing it, the way you'd notice sun. It is a small, brave, grey-bread Christmas at the bottom of a terrible year, and no feast in any hall in England is worked harder for or better earned. Winter now. The deep of it, and the deep of this story with it. And when I say winter, I need you to understand what that means here, at the bottom of this of all years. This isn't the winter, you know. A white picture on the far side of glass while the house hums warm around you. There is no far side. There is one room, one fire on a dirt floor, a roof of wet straw, and the cold standing patiently in the corners like a fourth member of the family. It does not knock. It moved in at All Souls, and it will not leave until Easter, and every single thing you do between now and then, you do in its company. January comes down hard after Christmas, and for once the sky's cruelty runs backward and does the village a favour. Black frost instead of rain. The mud that has been eating shoes and swallowing cartwheels since Whitsun sets overnight into ridged iron. For a fortnight the lanes are walkable, the wood sledges run easy, and the village moves about its own parish like a released prisoner. Frost is misery, but frost is dry misery, and after 8 months of rain, dry misery feels nearly like holiday. But frost is a lender, not a giver, and it collects indoors what it forgives outdoors. The water in the covered pail wears a lid of ice every morning now, and you break it with the heel of your hand before you can so much as wet your face. The inside of the daub grows a fur of frost where the fire's reach gives out. Your breath shows in your own house. Stephen sleeps in the middle of the bed now, between you and Alice. A small furnace mined for warmth by both of you without shame, and the hens have come back to their beam above the door whether anyone likes it or not, because a frozen hen lays nothing forever. They barely lay as it is. Hens lay by light, and light is the one thing January does not stock. 4 eggs a week now, where June gave you a dozen and more. The closest thing to free money God ever made, and even God's free money keeps short hours in winter. The days are a squint of grey between 2 darknesses, and the work slides indoors with the light. This is the season the whole year has been quietly aiming at, the season that explains every other season and what it is. Above everything is thread. Wood must still be hauled, and water must still be fetched. Water is always again, frost or no frost, and the pottage still hangs over the fire in its blackened pot. But the hours, the long shutter-barred hours from an afternoon dusk to a mid-morning dawn, belong to the distaff and the spindle. You light rushlights for it, rushes peeled in summer and drawn through hot fat, each one burning with a small leaning flame for half an hour, give or take, and costing next to nothing, which is the entire point of rushlights. By that light you spin. Alice spins beside you. The wool of Whitefoot's June fleece runs through your fingers, grease-soft and endless. The flax silk from Hugh's 10 paces as dirt runs finer still, pale as winter light. The best work your hands have ever done. The thread box fills clue by clue, and the thread box is the rent, and the rent is the roof, and the roof is the children sleeping under it. That is the whole chain, and on any evening you choose you can hold every link of it in your 2 working hands. Lambert kept his word too. Every Saturday the roads allow, your thread goes south and pennies come north, the same rate the year round, and Alice's rate rose at Christmas exactly as he foretold, and she keeps her own reckoning of her own clues on a stick. She notched herself, because she has watched you all year, and girls learn the way thread runs, off one spindle onto the next, and food is arithmetic now, in a way even this year has not shown you before. The loft holds the whole of it, and you know it the way Walter knows his sticks. The grey meal of the sprouted harvest, which bakes into flat sour loaves that sit in the belly like river clay and are eaten to the last crumb anyway. The oats, the peas, the vetches from the August scramble, Beast food in any ordinary year. Tares, the stuff of parables, soaked soft now and gone into the pot without one word of complaint from anyone at your bench. The smoked eels hanging in their dark row from the roof beam, one taken down each week, fat and salt-free and entirely illegal. And the beans. A sack of dried beans in November is a wall against February. You were told that, and you built that wall bean row by bean row in the spring rain. And now February arrives and leans its whole weight on it, and the wall holds. There are evenings when the pottage is thinner than pride would like, when you ladle the children's bowls deep and yours shallow, and eat standing with your back to them, so nobody does the arithmetic of the bowls. But there is pottage. Every day, of every week, there is pottage. In the year of grace 1316, in the hungriest winter England has known since the Conqueror harried the north, that plain sentence is a fortress, because hunger, real hunger, the kind with a face, arrives in the parish this winter too, not through your door, along the road. They come singly and in twos, out of the worst-drained country, out of villages whose whole harvest drowned where yours half drowned. Grey-faced men offering a day's threshing for a meal, women with children slung at their backs, walking from steeple to steeple the way the desperate have always navigated England. The village feeds whom it can at the church porch. Father Ralph keeps a pot there on doling days, and Walter, in his flat grey way, has let it be known which households can spare a handful of meal toward it, and which may not shame themselves trying, and bars its doors at night, and does both without hypocrisy. 40 hearths can hold a hand out to the road. 40 hearths cannot hold the road up. Everyone knows the difference, and nobody says it aloud. One iron grey morning in the week after Epiphany, a stranger is found dead in the hedge below the mill, curled small as a sleeping child, thin as a lantern, frost in his beard, no scrip, no knife, no name. Oh, it is Evo who finds him, going down at first light to loose the wheel, and mark what the miller does, because nobody in this village likes the miller, and this year has been teaching you exactly what liking is worth. Evo carries the man in out of the frost with his own flour-dusted arms, lays him decent on the mill-house boards, and pays. Out of the toll-dish everyone curses, for the winding cloth and the grave-digging both. The village stands in the churchyard 2 days later in the hard cold while Father Ralph says the office over a man whose name God alone keeps, the same words, at the same unhurried pace, he would give an abbot. And every soul standing in that frost is doing the same sum behind a still face, 6 miles of worse luck. That is all the distance there is between that hedge and mine. You stir Cecily's mash twice that winter, but the brewing is a shadow of its summer self. You come into the warm reek of her kitchen on a raw February morning and find the great lead only half fired, and Cecily staring into it like a woman reading bad news in the steam. 9 shillings, she says, not turning. The quarter of malt. 9. It was 3 and 4 in the spring. You stood there. You heard me price it. The maltster named it yesterday like a man confessing. Couldn't look at me while he did it. She jabs the paddle down and turns it slow. So it's small ale and short brewings till God remembers where he put the sun. The pennies come faster, mean less. That's dearth for you, girl. Everything you touch turns to money and money turns to nothing. You take the paddle from her and stir, and the sweet steam soaks your face. And for a while there is only the fire's talk and the drag of the paddle through the mash. You still have your 4 walls, you say, she snorts. Then she's quiet for longer than Cecily is ever quiet, and when she speaks again all the loudness is out of it. the way it went out of it once before, on a mash day a lifetime ago in the spring. Fire, thread, ale and eggs, she says. Build them, I told you. You built them. I've watched you do it. The whole lane's watched, don't think we haven't. The paddle keeps its slow circle. So here's the other half that my mother gave me at the bottom of a year like this one, when I was your age and greener. Building is the easy part, Muld. Any strong back builds. Holding is the trade. She takes the paddle back and looks at you sideways, edge and warmth in the one look, Cecily entire. Hold them. Winter is a siege. That is all it is and all it has ever been. Walls you raised in the warm months and the long cold patience of holding them, and you hold. Old Sarah dies on St. Agnes's Eve, the 20th of January in her sleep by her banked fire, in the cottage by the green where she was born 70 winters ago. She dies the way the old are supposed to die, and in this year, so rarely get to. Warm, fed after a fashion, and owing nobody. Her granddaughter finds her in the morning looking, she says, like a woman listening to something pleasant a long way off. And Emma is at your door within the hour, satchel on her hip, and says only, "Bring your good linen thread, and come." Because this too is women's ground, and nobody has ever pretended otherwise. The church buries you, and the manor taxes you. Even in death it taxes you. The best beast, if there is a beast. But it is the women of your own lane who receive you. Yes, the neighbours wash the dead. That's normal. Every parish in England does it this way, has done past memory, will do for centuries yet. These same hands at both doors of life. Emma is master of this room as she is master of the birthing room, and she talks you through it the same way, low, steady, unstoppable. You heat the water, you wash the small old body with the grey-green soap limb by limb gently, as if gentleness still had an address there. You bind the jaw with your good linen thread. You comb out the thin white hair, a lifetime under wimples, and nobody but her mother and her husband and now you has ever seen it down. You dress her in her wedding smock, kept 60 years folded in her chest for exactly this morning, because everyone here keeps something folded for exactly this morning. And on the stool by the bed her distaff stands with its last cloud of wool half spun. "Finish winding it," Emma says, nodding at the spindle. "Never leave a dead woman's thread on the spindle. It frets them. Whether it frets the dead or the living she does not say, and you do not ask. You wind off old Sarah's last thread, even and fine. Her hands were better than yours to her final week, and you say so, and Emma says, 'They were better than anyone's. Who do you think taught my mistress?' And there it is, in one sentence. In a cold cottage with a shutter open to let the soul go. The whole ladder of it, hand to hand, hearth to hearth, mistress to girl, back and back past memory. You are standing on a rung of it. You did not climb on. You were born on. They ring her to the churchyard 2 days later, Father Ralph hauling the one bell himself, unevenly, because his sexton's shoulder is worse in the cold. The ground is iron, and the grave takes the digging men a day and a half, and the whole village comes, because Sarah was the last alive who remembered the great dearth of King Henry's day, 60 winters gone, when she was a girl. It is not lost on one person at that graveside that the woman who remembered the last hunger has left in the middle of this one, as if the parish memory itself had been wanted elsewhere. At Candlemas, the 2nd of February, the village fills the church with every candle it owns, to be blessed against the year, and your farthing beeswax candle burns on Our Lady's altar with the rest, bought at an August market that already feels like another woman's life. Half your wood and half your hay you should still have at Candlemas Day, the old saying goes. Nobody in Codicote has half of either. Father Ralph, who knows it, preaches on the light growing anyway, a minute a day, whether the store lofts believe in it or not. It is the shortest sermon anyone can remember, and the best. And then, in the middle of February, on a night of freezing fog with the moon smothered somewhere behind it, the latch rattles long after dark, and it is Godwin's eldest boy, breathless, bareheaded, 11 years old, and scared right down to his boots. His mother's time has come 3 weeks early, and Dame Emma is away across the parish at another bed and cannot be fetched before morning, and the boy was not sent to the next house, nor the one after. He was sent to yours. You stand in your own doorway for the space of one breath, with the fog coming in past you and your heart going like Cecily's paddle. Then you do what Emma would do, which is begin. Alice is up on one elbow already. She will bar the door and mind Stephen and the fire. She is 10 now, and this year has made her older than that, and you could no more stop her hearing how a birth sounds through a wattle wall than you could stop the rain. So better she hears it knowing her own mother is the one steadying it. You take the satchel Emma leaves at your house between times. She's been leaving it there since Michaelmas, you realise suddenly, the way you suddenly notice a thing that has been quietly true for months. And you go out into the fog. 14 hours Jones boy took in the heat of July. Godwin's wife is quicker and harder, a winter baby in a hurry. The room fills with the lane's women the way such rooms always fill, out of the fog, unbidden, shawled and capable. The fire is built up till the sweat runs, because a labouring woman must never take a chill. Water heats and heats again. And you find that your hands know the order of things because Emma's voice put it there, all these months, herb by herb and word by word. Rest now, breathe now, scream if it helps. Screaming's free. Somewhere past the middle of the night the fear goes out of you entirely, and what is left is that flat, bright usefulness, which is Emma's whole religion, and which you first felt at Joan's bedside and now recognise like a landmark on a known road. And at the worn-out end of the dark, with the fog paling towards something not yet day, the child comes, a girl, small, furious, slippery as an eel and twice as loud, into your 2 bare hands. Yours, nobody else's. Her first breath in the world, and the hands it lands in belong to a widow from up the lane who, 1 year ago, had caught nothing in her life but lambs. You tie the cord in 2 places with your good linen thread, and you cut it with Hugh's knife. The ash-handled knife he carved the winter Alice was born, that has hung at your belt through every hour of this whole year, that has cut bread and rope and rushes and eel spine, and never once anything that mattered more than supper. The first work it does in its next life is to cut a new soul loose into the world, his knife, her cord. You do not cry, because the room needs you not to, but something in your chest opens and closes like a door in wind once and is still. Emma arrives with the true dawn, frost in her wraps, having walked from the far bed through the fog. She examines the mother, the child, the cord, the room, you. 1 flick each, a whole examination, the same as ever. Then she sits down heavily on the birth stool, which she's entitled to, being 60 winters old at the very least and up 2 nights running, and says to the fire rather than to you, "Steady hands, as I said." A pause. "And I told you in the summer. Next one you'll catch. I'm rarely wrong, and never about hands. The lane pays you no coin for it, and you would have taken none. That is not how this is done, and you know that now from the inside. What you carry home instead, through the lifting fog, is heavier and better. Godwin at his own door, wordless, pressing on you a small sack of oats he can barely spare, and pressing harder when you refuse. The looks of the women as you pass recalibrated, the way the village looked differently at Cecily the year her ale won the wake, and Emma's satchel, which she does not take back. "Keep it by ye," is all she says. "I'll want it when I want it, and what I carry doesn't keep in a jar. It keeps in you now, some of it. The rest we'll get to. You went into that house one kind of woman. You came out another. No roll will record it. The manor's parchment has no column for it. The church will not so much as note the midwife at the baptism, but the lane knows, and the lane, if we are honest, is the only chronicle that ever knew your name. March comes in on a wind with knives in it, and with Lady Day bearing down, Father Ralph admits at last to a problem, standing in the church porch after Mass, turning his hat in his spotted hands. The bell, the one bell of St. Giles that has told this village its whole life, work and rest, mass and death, fire and feast, has begun to answer the rope with a groan he does not like, somewhere up in the dark of the tower where the great oak headstock swings. The bearing wants grease. The rope is fraying where it runs the wheel. His sexton's shoulder cannot climb a ladder. His own knees stopped being consulted about ladders years ago. And it must be seen to before Lady Day, because a rent day without a bell is like a year without a spring. "You've steady hands," he says, "and a head that doesn't spin, or Emma wouldn't use you. Come up the tower with me, Mauld." Which is how, on a hard, bright March morning, you find yourself climbing into the one place in this village you have never been. Up through the trap above the ringing floor, ladder by ladder, through the smell of cold flint and bird lime and 500 years of dust, past the slow, enormous patience of the tower's timbers, to the bell itself. It is older than anything else the village owns, older than the font, older than the oldest oak on the boundary, cast by some travelling founder in a pit by the churchyard in a year nobody thought to write down, and up close it is not a sound but a thing. Hundreds of pounds of grey-green metal hanging in blackened oak like a sleeping animal. You grease the bearings with wool fat while Father Ralph holds the light and gives instructions, mostly wrong, his old hands remembering the watching better than the doing, and you whip the frayed stretch of rope with waxed linen thread from your own box, because thread, as this year keeps proving, is the answer to more of the world than anyone admits. And when it's done, Father Ralph pushes open the little door in the parapet and says, "Well, you've earned the view," and you step out onto the leads 40 feet up in the moving air, and your whole world lies down at your feet. You have never seen it. That is the thing you could not have known until it happens. You have lived every day of 28 years inside this place, and you have never once seen it. There is the lane, your lane, a brown thread stitched with roofs. There is your own roof. You know it instantly, the way you would know Stephen's cry in a crowd, with its thin blue banner of smoke standing up from the smoke hole, and the sight of it does something to you that you will not find words for until you are old. That is your fire, kept alive through frost and famine by your 2 hands, and here is its flag flying over your children's heads, one banner among 40. Every roof flies one. 40 hearths, 40 smokes, and under every smoke a woman who knelt before dawn this morning, lifted a clay dome off the embers, held her breath, and breathed a red eye back into flame. There is the croft, absurdly small from up here, a green-brown strip you could cover with your thumb, the whole ache of your back, thumb-sized, and at its foot the flax strip, a stripe of finer tilth, 10 paces of dirt that carried a family through a famine winter. There is the well, with its parliament of 2 in session. There is Cecily's roof, flying the fatter smoke of a brewing fire. There is the mill, its pond a steel coin, its wheel throwing a glitter of water, and the river running its longest through the alders. And you can see the very bank, the very hollow lip of root shadow, where the eel trap lies staked and drowned and invisible, and the tower cannot see it, and no tower ever will, and you smile all alone up there in the wind like a woman getting away with something. Because you are. There are the great fields laid open across the swell of the land in their hundreds of strips, long ribbons of ploughland side by side. Yours and Godwin's and the abbot's own domain interleave like the pages of a book, the whole village wrote together and nobody can read alone. From the ground, behind the plough, one strip is the whole world and a day's sweat. From up here the strips run together into a single vast patched cloak thrown over the shoulders of the country, field after field, manor after manor, fading blue toward the edge of sight. And every square yard of it, every furrow, every hedge, every ditch, every fold, was made by hands and is kept by hands. Nothing you can see made itself. Somebody ploughed it, hedged it, grazed it, gleaned it, and will again, forever. You knew that. Everybody knows that. But knowing it and seeing it are 2 different kinds of knowledge, and only one of them changes you. And away south, small on the horizon, red as an old scar in the cold light, the tower of St Albans, 6 miles, and from up here, a thumbnail. The thing that owns you, the thing that owns the whole patched cloak to the horizon and past it, that has stood over every day of your life and your mother's life and hers. From the leads of your own squat flint tower, it is one more made thing standing out in the weather. Men stacked it up, brick by scavenged Roman brick, 240 years ago. Men could. The thought arrives like a stranger at the door, and you let it in and give it the bench by the fire. Men could, some far-off day, stack it down again. I come up at Easter and Michaelmas, Father Ralph says at your shoulder, holding his hat on. 50 years of it now, and you know what I've learned. The wind takes half his voice. What's left is cracked and mild. From up here you can't tell a villain's roof from a freeman's. Can't tell wool from linen, nor a rent day from a feast day. Only one thing shows from up here, Mould. He nods at the 40 smokes. Whose fire's gone out? That's the whole of my divinity after 50 years. Keep the fires in. God can sort the rest. You are barely a notch on one stick, in one bundle, in one barn, of one manor, of one abbey, in one kingdom of a wide, cold world. You always knew it. From up here you can finally see it, and see the other thing too, the thing the rolls will never write. That the notch is load-bearing, that the smoke rises because you rise, that the whole vast cloak of England is held together, thread by thread and fire by fire, by people the parchment barely names. You climb down with grease on your hands and wine tears in your eyes, and you are somebody slightly different at the bottom of the ladder than you were at the top. That happens on towers. It is one of the things towers are for. On Lady Day the bell rings true, and you can hear your own rope whipping in the smooth run of it, a thing nobody else on earth knows or needs to, and you stand in the queue at the manor barn and count your 2 shillings into the steward's clerk's box. 24 silver pence. Whole, on the day, thread money and egg money and the pennies from Cecily's stirring, and the last of Godwin's oat sack turned to coin, the pot by the door-post emptied to its clay, and the holding safe for 1 more quarter. The clerk writes. Walter watches the clerk write. Nothing is said. From Walter, as ever, nothing said is a whole psalter of approval. And in that same week, because you've been building toward it all winter, barley sprouted on your own floor and turned morning and night till it cheated, dried slow over the fire, ground fine and quiet at the dark of the moon on the stone that pays no toll. You carry your first full brewing through mash and wort and ferment with Cecily standing over the tun like a judgment in an apron. And on a bright cold Friday you cut a green branch from the hedge and set it over your own door. A bush, your bush, over your door, and the village comes. Joan first, of course, jug in one hand and fat solemn Peter on her hip, delighted out of all proportion. Roger, who drinks his pot in the doorway and pronounces it to the middle distance, better than the widow's thread and near as good as her eels, which is Roger telling the entire fold by supper time everything that Roger knows. Godwin's boy, sent down with a big jug and his mother's love. Even Evo, up from the mill, who pays his penny full, drinks standing, sets the pot down and says, "Widow," a nod. Nothing else. 2 words a year, and each one worth a speech. Cecily tastes last, deliberately, in front of everyone, like a bishop at a font. She takes her time, she looks at the ceiling, she looks into the pot. "It'll do," she says, from Cecily court poetry. The lane knows it and laughs and drinks. At the next manor court you're immersed 1 penny as a brewster selling ale against the assize. The same fine reed against every alewife on the roll. The fine that is a licence wearing a scowl. And you pay it with a curtsy you practised in Cecily's kitchen until the pair of you wept laughing against the mash tune. The steward's clerk, the young one with the face like an unpaid bill, writes it down. From the widow Atterwell Brewster, 1 penny. He means it as a smudge in a ledger. Read it the other way, the way the well reads it. The manor's own parchment now records that the widow Atterwell has ale to sell. It is the first time in your life the Abbey's memory has called you anything but a duty. A widow with a green bush over her door doesn't starve, Cecily told you a year and a world ago. You are, as of this cold, bright spring, that widow, April again. It astonishes you faintly that April simply comes, that after such a year the world would dare to be ordinary. But the world is not embarrassed, and April comes. Whitefoot lambs again in the second week of it. On a cold, clear morning, quick and clean as before. Another ewe lamb up and butting inside the hour, while last spring's daughter. A sturdy shearling now, her first fleece heavy on her back and promised already to your spindle, watches over the hurdles with an expression of profound sheep suspicion. Roger, folding them, is greyer than the autumn left him. His count stands at 1 sheep in 4 lost to the murrain, and no shepherd forgets a winter like that. But he grins his 3 teeth at the lamb all the same. Sheep don't read court rolls, he says. Grass comes, they lamb. There's whole years of divinity in that, if anybody asked me, which nobody does. Your fold of 1 is becoming, you by you, a fold. The sowing boons are rendered. 2 long days, broadcast sowing on the Lord's land, you and Alice side by side in the line of women, seed aprons heavy, arms swinging in that old shared rhythm that is almost, at moments, a dance nobody will admit to. Walter crosses the notches, stick against stick, wood answering wood. Your own croft takes its seed, beans in, more beans than last year, a wider wall for next February, because you learn or you starve, barley in, onions in. And on a soft grey evening you kneel at the south ditch and sow the flax strip again, casting the sleek brown seed thin and even, and this year Alice sows the last 3 paces herself, frowning like a chess player, getting it right. A farthing's worth of blue flowers, Hugh. Your mother sowed that strip because her mother sowed it. You sow it because it carried your children through a famine winter. Alice will sow it some day for her own reasons, on ground you will never see, and the reasons will be right, because the strip itself will teach them to her, the way it taught you. And then, in the middle weeks of May, with the barley an inch high, and the hedges white with May blossom, the sky closes again. The clouds come up out of the southwest in that long train you know now, one after another, unloading, moving on, replaced. The rain sets in, not showers, the standing grey days of it, and the village looks up and understands and goes on working. But there is a new note in the going on, quieter than despair and harder wearing. The sound of people singing the second verse of a song they now know all the words to. The old sayings do not get said this year. St. Swithin is not consulted. The Wells Parliament trades no comfort now, only intelligence, whose low furrows are drowning first, whose seed went in soundest. The corn market at St. Albans is whispering. You stack your wood higher and earlier. You buy salt in April instead of August, and Cecily does, and Joan does, because you told them to. The lane listens to you now. That still catches you off guard on the days you notice it at all. You do not yet know, and be glad tonight that she does not know lying in her bed with the rain beginning on the thatch, that this second summer will be crueller than the first, that the harvest of 1316 will fail worse than the harvest before it, that wheat will pass 26 shillings the quarter before another winter is out, and in London men will swear near 40, that the hungry time has years left to run, and when it finally lifts, the people of this island will look back and call it, needing no other name, the Great Famine, and will date their lives from it, before the famine, after the famine, the way you date yours from Hugh. She knows none of that. She knows the beans are in, and wider than last year. The trap is staked in the dark water. The bush is green over the door. The thread box is full, the tally is kept. The satchel waits by the wall, and the fire has not died, not once, through the whole siege of the worst winter in living memory. The walls held. Whatever is coming will find them held again. That is not hope exactly. It is something better suited to this climate. It is competence, compounding. On quiet evenings now, when the pottage is eaten and the hens are counted and the children are asleep, you sometimes sit on the threshold stone in the last of the long spring light, spindle turning low and slow at your knee out of pure habit, the way other people breathe, and you take the day's census of your world as the dark comes up the lane. Cecily's laugh carrying from 3 doors up, over some ruin of a joke her quiet husband mumbled for her to make loud. Jones somewhere through the wattle walls of the world singing Peter down to sleep with the carol Stephen wore out at Christmas, a season out of true and sweeter for it. Emma abroad in the dusk with the second satchel she finally made herself, at one door of life or the other, a small thorn-root shape moving along a hedge, refusing to be finished. Walter counting his footsteps home past the barn he holds together with notched sticks and a level voice. Evo's wheel, groan and rush, down in the valley, grinding the Lord's toll and the parish's bread, honest to the 16th measure, kinder than his dish, and his door will ever confess. Roger folded up on the darkening chalk among his lambs, Lambert on some road somewhere with 50 parishes thread in his packs, calling the sky to witness against every price in England. Father Ralph's bell, your own rope whipping running smooth inside its voice, ringing the day down. The world contains all of it. It's all of the rain and the rent, the dish and the dole, the hedge where a nameless man died and the room where a nameless girl was born into your two hands, the tower that owns and the tower that watches, the quern and the mill, the king who could not buy bread and the bean wall that held. All of it at once, all of it true, and the evening holds it the way you hold the spindle, lightly without stopping. Tomorrow there will be water. Tomorrow there will be weeding, and wet hay to fight for, and thread, and the pot, and the whole turning wheel of it. The same as today, the same as your mother's todays, the same as all the summers stretching out ahead, fat ones and lean ones, in whatever order God and the weather choose to send them. But that's tomorrow. Tonight the lane is quiet, and the rain has stopped for a while out of something like courtesy, and you're simply tired. Tired in the good flat way of a body that has been used all day for exactly what it is for, and a mind that has for once no arithmetic left over. Go in now, bar the door. The hens are on their beam, counted 3. Whitefoot and the lambs are folded on the chalk under Roger's watch. The pot is scoured, the crock is full, tomorrow's kindling is drying by the hearth. You heap the ash just so, and set the clay curfew over the red heart of the fire that must not die, and has not died, not one single time, in the whole turning of this year. You've kept it the way it has kept you, which is to say daily, patiently, in small bites, without witnesses and without praise. The oldest bargain there is, older than rents, older than bells. You lie down in the wide bed with a child breathing on either side of you. Alice's cold feet find your shins the same as every night. Stephen's fist winds into your smock the same as every night. The wind moves in the thatch. Somewhere up toward the wood a fox screams, and nobody wakes. 6 miles south, in the black of the night, the monks will rise to sing matins under the red tower, praying for the souls of the living and the dead. Among them, in a general way, yours. Let them. Every soul can use more than one kind of keeping, and you have never yet refused help on the grounds of its address. And the woman lying in this bed is not the woman who lay here at the start of our story, 1 year and a world ago, counting 5 missing pence in the dark. She is paid a whole year of quarter days, to the hour, in the worst year in memory. She has stood up in open court with a stick of split hazel, and made a steward's clerk unwrite what he wrote. She has ground forbidden flour at the dark of the moon, and smoked forbidden eels with a shutter barred, and sold true measure ale under her own green bush with the manor's own parchment for a witness. She has held a mash paddle, a bell rope, a gleaning hand, a birthing room, and a dead friend's last thread, and not one of them shook in her grip. She has laid out the oldest woman in the parish, and caught the newest soul in it, and cut its cord with the dead man's knife, and the knife is at her belt tonight where his hand used to be, where it belongs. The girl who once gripped her mother's hand on the market road and asked if God lived in the great red tower, she's still in there. She is always still in there. She's just no longer the one holding the reins. You are warm enough. You are fed enough. You are safe enough. You have fire and thread and ale and eggs. You have 2 children breathing, a ewe in the fold, a bush over the door, and a lane that knows your name. In the year of grace, 1316, that is more than kings. You saw it yourself with your own eyes in a marketplace at St Albans. More on the one day it was measured than kings could buy. That's enough. Say it the way the village says its prayers by heart without doubting. It is enough. Let the day go now, let the list dissolve. It is done, every notch of it is crossed. Wood answered wood. Let the rain come if it is coming. The thatch is thick, the beams are in, and the walls have held before. Let sleep come up the lane like Emma in the dusk, unhurried, certain, sent for. Sleep comes, centuries will pass. The village he knows will change beyond all recognition. The lanes will be drained and paved. The cottages of sticks and clay will soften back into the ground that lent them, and other houses will stand above their floors, and the people in those houses will sometimes turn up, digging a garden, a worn grey disk of millstone grit, and wonder what it was. The mill will grind on the Mimram for 600 more years, and then stand still, and then become a house where people sleep to the sound of the water. The open fields will close, the strips will vanish into hedged squares, and the sheep walks will outlast the wool that made England rich. 15 years from this very night, and now you may know the thing that was promised you, the abbot's answer. A new abbot of St Albans, Richard of Wallingford, a blacksmith's son, and the finest mathematician in England, will lose his patience with 200 years of grinding wives. His officers will search the town and the manors and seize the handmills at last, dozens upon dozens of them, from under floors exactly like hers. And he will pave the floor of his parlour with the confiscated stones, so that every soul who comes before him must walk upon the defeat of the poor. That floor will lie there for 50 years, and then, in a hot June of another age, in the great rising of 1381, the people of St Albans will break into the abbey and tear that parlour floor up, stone by stone, and crack the querns into pieces, and hand the pieces around the crowd. The chroniclers themselves will write it, the way blessed bread is handed around in a parish church, so that every household should carry home a share of the quarrel. Meld's quarrel. The wives lose every battle for 200 years, and win. And the abbey itself, the landlord of the tower and the toll dish, the owner of the eels and the notches, the power no one kneeling in Codicote could imagine ending. The abbey will end. Not in her century, nor the next, nor the one after. But on a winter day in 1539 the last abbot will surrender the whole of it, tower and shrine and rolls and rents to a king's signature, and the arithmetic that owned her village for 500 years will stop, like a wheel when the sluice is shut, but the tower will stand. It stands tonight. You could rise from your own bed, 700 years after hers, and travel to St Albans, and walk in under that same red Roman brick, and stand in the longest nave in England, near the gatehouse where a villain's wife once stood listening, and some evenings the singing still seeps out through the stone, and it still does not care what anyone holds or renders or owes. And in that abbey a monk called John, who lived through the hungry years, wrote them into his chronicle, the drowned harvests, the terrible prices, the king who came to St Albans and could scarcely find bread, and his pages survive. That is how we know. He wrote down the kings, the quarters, the shillings, the well, the distaff, the birthing room, the bean wall, the banked fire. Those nobody wrote. Those survived another way. They survived by being done again the next morning, and the next 10,000 mornings deep by women whose names the parchment never learned. But people will still fetch water. People will still keep fires, and feed the children first and eat last, standing from the smallest bowl in more houses of this world tonight than anyone cares to count. Women will still keep women. Every hospital corridor at 3 in the morning knows it. Emma's whole religion, alive and walking. The language itself will keep her. Every spinster, every curfew, every distaff side of every family and every modern mouth is a small stone carried from her floor. Some things don't change. The keeping doesn't change. And you, listening in your warm room, in your soft bed, with clean water inside the wall, and light waiting at a touch, and bread in the kitchen that cost you no gleaning, you're not far from her. You are what her whole life was aimed at, whether she could have imagined you or not, somewhere far back along your own thread, and the thread is unbroken. It cannot be otherwise. You are here. Very a woman in a dark cottage on a cold morning, lifting a clay dome off the embers, holding her breath, finding the red eye alive and beginning again. Her fire came through. You are the room it warmed. So let it come now. Let sleep take you the way it took Matilda Atterwell in the wide bed on Hayden Way, 700 years ago, with a child's breath on either side of her, and the rain gone quiet on the thatch. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften, and finally stop. The fire is banked. The door is barred. The list is done. You've earned this rest. She would be the first to tell you so, standing probably from the smallest bowl. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.